Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for a CKPG News special presentation, Remembering Together. Every year on November 11th, Canadians pause in a moment of silence to honor and remember the men and women who have served and continue to serve Canada during times of war, conflict, and peace. We remember the more than 2 million Canadians who have served throughout our nation's history and the more than 118,000 who made the ultimate sacrifice. By remembering their service and their sacrifice, we recognize the freedom these women and men fought to preserve. Like many things this year, Remembrance Day ceremonies across the country have felt the impacts of COVID-19. While we're not able to gather as a community together, we are still able to join our loved ones at home to remember the men and the women of our armed forces, past and present. This year's Remembrance Day ceremony looks different here in Prince George. There is no parade or community gathering downtown. Instead, over the next hour, we'll bring you live coverage from the Prince George Cenotaph as a small delegation lays wreaths and observes a moment of silence. Following this, you will hear from many local representatives, including Branch 43 Legion officials, Marilyn Hall, DAYI POUNTNEY, and other local officials. While we can't all be at the cenotaph together, we can still remember together.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Welcome to our 2020 Remembrance Day ceremonies. I am Margaret Goings, President of Branch 43, Royal Canadian Legion. Remembrance Day affects each of us in a very personal way. Unfortunately, we are not able to gather together to comfort and share memories, good and bad, as we have in previous years. Please take the time, wherever you are, to pause and hold 2 minutes of silence for our fallen comrades. 100 years ago, returning soldiers were part of a major pandemic which spread influenza and saw widespread death around the world. Here we are in another pandemic, the duration effects of which we are not fully aware. It is one in which our military and our Legion are playing important roles to support our communities. If you have the privilege to know why any of these warriors who fought for Canada in the Second World War and Korea, please take the opportunity to learn from them as that generation is leaving us. It is also a good time to learn from those who are or have recently served, for those memories are sharp and need to be heard. There are new generations of veterans who need to support and help that successful governments that have been slow to provide. PTSD has become better understood for its effects upon soldiers who served in peacekeeping efforts in the Cold War, in the former Yugoslavia, and in the drawn-out struggle of the war in Afghanistan. Even so, still more work needs to be done. There are Canadians serving around the world as part of NATO and UN missions to support our friends and to help people in need. Some of our soldiers have died or been injured in domestic service in Canada. This service also matters. We know of the visible wounds and scars that many have returned with from their struggles overseas. Some of our soldiers have faced terrors that most of us would never comprehend. Their pain is real regardless of visible wounds. To all those veterans, I thank you for your service, and I thank you for coming home to help keep Canada strong and safe. The Legion is in much need of the skills and time of these young men and women to join us in our continuing mission to see no soldier, sailor, or aircrew left behind. The Legion is a place for those veterans to get the help that they need and to use their skills to help others. The Legion has much to offer these new veterans, and these veterans have much to offer the Legion. Making sure that your comrades are doing okay is very important. Stay in touch. We are social beings and need contact with other people. It is possible to maintain social distancing without being social distant. We continue to help veterans obtain the resources that they need from Veterans Affairs or as needed from the FOPI funds built by our community. The POPI campaign this year has not been the same due to the current circumstances of COVID-19. While the need for the resources of that campaign are as important as ever, building those resources is the least that we can do to support our veterans. The Legion stands for veterans, and it is first and foremost a veterans organization. It is also a place for those who wish to help to step forward and serve the cause of remembrance. The Legion continues to be a vibrant contributor to our community. If you love your country, take the time to thank a vet. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, good morning. Every year at about this time, most of us wear a red flower in our lapels. We do this to remember and to honor those who served and those who fell in the service of our country. There are different versions of how this custom began. I believe it started during the First World War in a war-torn field in a part of Belgium known as Flanders. A young doctor at a Canadian field hospital was taking a break from his grim duty of patching up the shrapnel-torn and bullet-riddled bodies of young men. In the field before him were rows of white crosses where those who had made the ultimate sacrifice were laid to rest. In the distance, he could hear the thunder of big guns firing an artillery barrage, and overhead he could faintly hear birds singing. He sat down and scribbled a few lines of verse that have since become immortalized in Canadian military history, and indeed inspired the wearing of a scarlet poppy as a symbol of remembrance. The doctor's name was Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. In 1918, he died of pneumonia somewhere in France. Hear now the words he wrote on that day so long ago. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky the lark, still bravely singing, flies, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. In 1918, a lady known only as Miss Michael wore the poppy as a symbol of remembrance. I believe she was the first to do so. She also wrote a short verse that is quite appropriate to the occasion. I'd like to read it to you now. O you who sleep in Flanders field, sleep sweet to rise anew. We caught the torch you threw, and holding high, we keep faith with those who died. We cherish too the poppy red that grows on fields where valor led, and seems to signal to the skies that blood of heroes never dies, but lends a luster to the red of flowers that bloom above the dead in Flanders field. Now the torch and poppy red we wear in honor of our dead. Fear not that you have died for naught. We've learned the lesson that you taught in Flanders field. And now, each year, near the end of October, we again wear a red poppy as a symbol of remembrance and as a token of honor and respect for those many who gave their lives that others might live. I salute you. We will remember them. Here's the veteran's prayer. O Almighty God, the great ruler and architect of the universe, we offer thanks for the life and health given us to carry the torch this far, and ask your divine help for the future. We desire your presence with us this day and may your guiding light penetrate the hearts of all assembled here. We pray you at this time to comfort the sick, heal the wounded, and give them patience under their suffering and a happy issue out of their afflictions. Cherish the mothers, the widow, and the fatherless of our brave boys who made the supreme sacrifice in the great conflict. Give them strength to overcome their great loss. Be near them in their solitude, and give us all the will to hold the torch still high, to be an inspiration to all the world, that the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, may be with us now and through eternity. Amen.
I would like to welcome the viewers from CKPG-TV joining us from home today to celebrate or to remember Remembrance Day this year. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 43 Chaplain Susan Scott, accompanied by Prince George RCMP Chaplain Brian Joyce for the call to worship.
Grace be unto you and peace. In a world filled with violence and war, we gather together to celebrate the promise of peace. In a world filled with tyranny and oppression, we gather together to celebrate the promise of justice for all. In a world filled with hunger and greed, we gather together to celebrate the promise of plenty for all. Our hope is in the name of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer of heaven and earth. The souls of the righteous are in the hands of the Creator. Their bodies are buried in peace, but their names live forevermore. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns fell silent on the Western Front to bring an end to the First World War. Time stands still for a moment. Our nation has recalled that moment through our armistice and remembrance events down the years. Decades during which men and women of our armed services have continued to pay the ultimate sacrifice. Canadians have been called to serve in other wars, conflicts, and battles these many years. Each and every veteran, living and deceased, regardless of where they served, is valued by this commemoration. And so, 75 years after the end of World War II, we gather to remember lives sacrificed in the service of our country and those traumatized and injured in conflict, those whose suffering continues. Grant us such a devotion to justice and freedom that the heroism of all who fought and still fight may continue to be remembered in a nation of service and in a world of peace.
Let us pray for all who suffer as a result of conflict and ask that God may grant honor and healing. For the servicemen and women who have died in the violence of war, each one remembered by and known to God, may God give peace. For those who love them in death as in life, offering the distress of our grief and the sadness of our loss, may God give peace. for civilian women, children, and men whose lives are disfigured by war or terror, calling to mind in penitence the anger and hatred of humanity, may God give peace. For all members of the armed forces who are in service this day, remembering family and friends and all who pray for their safe return, may God give peace. For peacemakers and peacekeepers, the members of the RCMP and the fire service who seek to keep this world secure and free, may God give peace. For the youth of our community who are in cadets, for their leaders, instructors, and especially their parents and families, may God give peace. For all who bear the burden and privilege of leadership, political, military, and religious, grant wisdom and resolve in the search for reconciliation and peace. May God give peace. O God of truth and justice, we hold before you those whose memories we cherish and those whose names we will never know. Help us lift our eyes above the torment of this broken world and grant us the grace to pray for those who wish us harm. As we honor the past, may we put our faith in your future, for you are the source of life and hope, now and forever. Amen.
This year we'll be laying 13 wreaths to accompany the many others that were laid earlier today on behalf of many groups, clubs, and businesses and individuals that could not be here today due to the event restrictions. At this time, I'm going to once again welcome Royal Canadian Legion Chaplain Susan Scott to announce the names of these wreaths.
Welcome to our 13 gathered dignitaries, and my thanks to you all for your service and the organizations which you represent. It is my privilege as the child of two veterans to begin with our Silver Cross mothers this year. Silver Cross mother Colleen Fitzpatrick, accompanied by her husband Jim. Silver Cross mother Michelle Tott, accompanied by her husband Craig and daughter Delaney. Silver Cross mother Lorraine Matters, accompanied by her niece Patty Serio. Member of Parliament for Prince George Caribou, Mr. Todd Doherty. Member of the Legislative Assembly for Prince George Valemount, the Honorable Shirley Bond. Representing the Clakeley-Tenay First Nations, Councillor Clarence John. Representing the Regional District of Fraser-Fort George, Board Chair, Mr. Art Kane. Representing the City of Prince George, His Worship Mayor Lynn Hall. Representing the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 34, President Margaret Goings. Representing the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, representing the Canadian Armed Forces from the Rocky Mountain Rangers B Company, Colonel Tom Newell and his RSM. Representing the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Superintendent Sean Wright. Representing Prince George Fire Rescue Service, firefighter Dallas Smith. Representing Team Rubicon, Mr. Eric Depineau. Our commitment to remember. They are young as we are young. They served, giving freely of themselves. To them we pledge amid the winds of time to carry their torch and never forget. We will remember them.
Sergeant at Arms, prepare for last post. Let us pause to think reverently of those of our comrades who by sea, by land, and in the air laid down their lives for the sovereign and country. Their sacrifice will ever inspire us to labor on to the end, that those who survive and need our aid may be assured of assistance, and that the country in which we live and which they died may ever be worthy of the sacrifice they made. During the silence, we will remember our fallen comrades and those who have passed on since we last gathered together. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Thank you, Piper, Sheldon, Claire, for lament.
Hi, I'm TODD, Member of Parliament for Cariboo Prince George. 2020 has been a difficult year for all Canadians. This year's Remembrance Day is going to be significantly different than years past, but we must remember. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Canadians from all across our beautiful country will pause to remember those who served, those who continue to serve, and those who paid the ultimate sacrifice at home and abroad. This is a day to honor the brave men and women who answered the call, traveled to faraway lands, fought and died in relentless pursuit of freedom, of democracy. This is a day to honor those who came home and those who continue to serve our country and our communities. And we must always remember those who suffer from the invisible scars from their service. The freedom we enjoy is not free, and it comes at a very real cost. It is because of their service that our maple leaf stands tall and that we remain the true north, strong and free. We shall remember and honor them, not just on Remembrance Day, but every day, lest we forget.
Hello, I'm Bob Zimmer, Member of Parliament for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies, and today I'm at the War Memorial right here in Ottawa. And behind me, you actually see members of our very own military reserves standing at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And it just brings us to the point of remembering our fallen in the past and really the service that they brought for us in many battles that were fought on behalf of Canada. I just want to thank the men and women that have served our country so honorably and gave the ultimate sacrifice. Secondly, the current men and women in our military that serve us today. And lastly, especially those current men and women in our military that helped our seniors in care homes over this COVID crisis. Thank you, lest we forget.
COVID-19 has changed the world and the way we celebrate, the way that we mourn, the way that we work, and the way that we relate to one another. It has changed the way we will honor and remember those that serve and sacrifice on our behalf. But it has not and cannot change the need for us to pause on November the 11th and every day to express our gratitude for those who paid the ultimate price, those that fought and continue to fight for our freedom. Most of us cannot imagine what war is like. Perhaps the words of a soldier who fought at Vimy Ridge will help give us some sense of what they faced. In a 3-page letter, written in pencil, a soldier named Harry Chalmers said, and I quote, "Well, it's some sight to see a battlefield after the thing is over," Chalmers wrote. "There is not a square inch of ground that has not been touched by shell fire. It's just a mess of shell holes, barbed wire, and torn trenches. The most awful mess I ever seen. You can't realize what it's like. The front line and supports and third line of the Germans was pounded into a pulp. Such a noise I never imagined in my life. Bedlam was sure let loose. The sights around the field are terrible looking. I hope I don't witness anything like it again." And today, as we remember and honor, Harry's words are our words, hoping we don't see anything like it again. To those who serve on our behalf, including our veterans, our first responders, our police officers, we offer our heartfelt thanks. To their families and their loved ones, we share your loss, we share your fear and your pride as you watch your loved one step up to serve their community and their country. It is our responsibility to remember and to pass on that task to younger generations, to our sons and our daughters and our grandchildren. We must make a solemn promise that the sacrifice and the service will never be forgotten. We must never forget the price that was paid for our freedom, and we must never take our freedom for granted. Today, though physically apart, we will pause, remember, and be grateful. We will remember them, lest we forget, lest we forget.
As a small boy growing up, traveled around the province quite a bit, changed schools a number of times, probably a dozen times from grade 1 to 12 or more. And I found myself in the Chilliwack area, Vitter Crossing we lived in the mid-60s. And I joined the Royal Canadian Engineers Cadet Corps and associated with quite a few members from the Vitter Crossing military base that was there. But there were also a lot of veterans from the Second World War, from the Korean War that lived in that area and suffering immensely from some of the injuries that they had received fighting on behalf of Canada for our country. And it was an eye-opener for me as a young boy. And I started participating in the Remembrance Day ceremonies at that particular time, marching in the parades with the Cadet Corps. And from there on to the Rocky Mountain Rangers in Salmon Arm, and participated in the Remembrance Day ceremonies there for only 1 year before the Corps moved. And then I joined the RCMP, and I had the pleasure of participating in many Remembrance Day ceremonies across this province for many years, including duty at the cenotaph. And as I stood there, often in the cold and the snow, sometimes the rain, enduring that cold and shivering, right cold to the bone, I remembered about the people that fought so hard for our freedoms around the world, in the world wars, in all the wars that we've had, and the hardships that they endured day after day, year after year. And I didn't have much to complain about when I was standing there. So I remember them. And I remember my family members that have participated in the wars. My father-in-law, who was part of the Liberation Force during the Second World War and in Holland, and nephews who have gone to war in Afghanistan. Everybody does their part, and we can do our part at home here by remembering them, by keeping by participating in the moment of silence and participating in any way we can in order to remember all those that have gone before us, all those that have fought so hard for our freedoms here in Canada.
Hello, I'm DAYI POUNTNEY, and right now we are in beautiful Hotelea in Prince George, the museum piece that represents us, the Clade-Litane First Nation. We have to always come back and remember, and actually take the time to remember, as November 11th, to remember the sacrifice that was actually put forth in all these wars. Like, Canada got pretty much its independence in World War I by fighting as Canadians, and they got very well known. We were known in World War II for taking over the North. We were very good at what we did. We were very good at fighting for what we believed in. And this is a time to actually remember all those people from back then that put their lives on the line. A lot didn't come back, and we can't forget that. These were for freedoms. I know a lot of the First Nations kind of were forgotten after the big wars, so World War I, World War II. They were treated a lot differently, and that was never right. And they were treated as second-class citizens when they should have got all the rights as anybody else that fought overseas and actually defended freedom. So Big pieces like this where, they didn't get the Veterans Land Act, they didn't get pieces of land, they had to give up their status to leave reserve to actually go have a drink of beer with their buddies at the Legion, and none of this was allowed. So I think that can't be lost, just to make sure that moving forward this never happens again. For Clyde-Lee, we did have a small group of members, like we did have Alex Bird. He was a private in World War I, and to my knowledge we also had 4 more in World War II, which was, Alec Paul Sr., we had Max Pius, we also had Charlie Brassey and Jack Alexander from Clyde-Lee Tenay, and that's just from our small contingent. I know there's many more from Sicas, Jimmy Kwa, you got Notley, you got Stella. All the First Nations around here did contribute to these wars, and they put a lot in, and they fought hard and they died in these wars. So that they can't be seen lesser for doing that. And prior to that, I know with all these veterans that are actually coming back, their friends actually came and stuck up for them and actually helped get them the pieces they needed to go have a beer with them later. So that's the camaraderie within this, and that can never be lost either. We see these people in high regard. They were warriors. They went out to war, and then they fought hard side by each to everybody. And that's what it was. And people from the present to the future know that First Nations, we're here to stay. This is always our lands. We're always going to defend them, and we will fight side by each next to you. The one ask would be actually to take that minute of silence and take it to heart. Actually remember what people have done throughout these years, throughout these many wars, to give to ensure that we have the life that we have today. So I would say take that moment and remember them for that whole day.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few words of remembrance with you today. On this solemn day, we pause to reflect and honor the sacrifices of so many, so that we may enjoy the freedoms that we have today. We remember the commitment and the sacrifices of those who supported the Canadian military efforts from the front lines to the home front during war and peacekeeping operations around the world. We mourn for those who paid the ultimate price, and our hearts are with those who continue to live with the consequences of war, including trauma, both physical and emotional. On Remembrance Day, we acknowledge the courage and the sacrifice of those who served our country, and we accept the responsibility to continue to work for the peace they fought hard to achieve. On behalf of the Regional District of Fraser-Fort George, thank you to so many brave men and women, past and present, for their sacrifices to protect our freedoms here at home and to promote peace around the world. We will remember them.
Hi, I'm Lynn Hall, Mayor of Prince George, and I'd like to recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Clyde-Lee Tenay, and it's a privilege to have the opportunity to speak in recognition of Remembrance Day. So many events are different this year, including this day, but it is still so important for us to take the time to remember that the freedom we enjoy is due to the sacrifices of our best and bravest men and women. In the past, prior to Remembrance Day, we would have held a military church parade and Veterans Memorial Ceremony at Memorial Park Cemetery. Members of our first responders, the Royal Canadian Legion, Rocky Mountain Rangers, and Young Cadet Leagues would take part in a ceremony to honor our active service members and to remember the veterans who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Despite the fact that this ceremony could not occur in the usual way this year, we have still come together virtually and in small, safe groups to pay our respects. November 11th is a day on which the poppy is proudly worn over our hearts. Today we pay tribute to those who lost their lives in service, and we honor our brave veterans and those who are in active service around the world. I would also like to recognize and pay respect to those Prince George families who have lost their loved ones. We must remember not just today, but every day, the sacrifice and commitment of those families who support their loved ones in service to their country and who grieve most profoundly when they are lost. We will never forget all of the men and women who, in spite of the danger and perils, gave their all to protect the ideals of justice and freedom in our country. They deserve our gratitude and utmost respect. On behalf of the City of Prince George, my council colleagues, thank you. We are forever grateful, and we will remember. Everyone can participate from home. Post a photo of your remembrance to #PGRemembers. Thank you very much, everyone.